You are with the CyberHub Engage podcast. I'm your host, James Azar, and we have got a show for you guys today. Now, before we do that, though, we're going to get a quick message from our sponsor, but we're going to be right back with Michael Daugherty, former CEO of LabMD, the company that brought the FTC down to its knees. So this is going to be the most fascinating episode about government overreach. We're going to be right back after this. I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, GetSmartEye. That's GetSmartEye, like your eye, EYE.com. It's a new security company that's focused on your privacy. How many of you guys have eyes around watching your screens, your phones, your tablets, no matter where you are? It can be your own office, an airport, a train station, a co-working space, and even a coffee shop, right? But there's some documents and some information that really needs to stay away from prying eyes. That's where GetSmartEye comes in. They're using the latest biometric technology to give you complete control over the documents you send and who sees them. Whether you're viewing them yourself or sending them for someone else to view them, the GetSmartEye technology ensures that whoever's seeing it is the right person. And should someone who shouldn't see it grab a look at it, it gets the document to disappear and won't reopen it until it verifies the identity of the person you sent it to. So to get more information, go to getsmarteye.com/James. Again, that's getsmarteye.com/James. Again, getsmarteye.com/James. All right. So, hey, Mike, how's it going?
It's going well.
Well, thanks for being here. So I got to tell you, man, you and I met about a year ago.
Yeah, it flies by.
It does, doesn't it?
That's amazing.
It does. And your story shook me, right? Because it's essentially can happen to anyone. I mean, Google's getting pounded in the EU this morning, was just announced they got like another 1.7 billion
was it
euro.
17 billion or was it 1.7?
I think it was 1.7 billion.
Chump change to those people. Chump change. Okay.
Well, 1.7 billion.
Yeah, I know, but still.
1.7 billion.
They do.
Yeah. That's a, you know what we could, I mean, Europeans take that money and then,
I think they got a $25 million fine from the FTC about 6-7 years ago, and we calculated it was 3 minutes. So, it's everything's perspective, right?
Well, I think Europe's in a deficit kind of thing, and they're starting to go after big companies to kind of make up that deficit piece of it. Socialism doesn't really work.
We can talk about regulators, though. I will have very interesting, probably shocking opinions of people about European regulators. But
well,
anyway.
European regulators are the worst, in my opinion. But, before we get into that, your case, your story. I mean, I've read your book. I think I told you right before we went live. I read your book for like three nights in a row. Couldn't put it down. Didn't want to put it down because it got to the point where I was like, man, this is crazy. I mean, the stories here, listen. So first of all, you had LabMD. So why don't we tell our guests who maybe have never heard the LabMD, our audience, just so you know, Michael's global. So there are some people who may not know.
Oh no, listen. What's amazing and kind of terrifying is that even though I have won and really changed the face of cybersecurity regulation, because I'm not the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, most people don't know. And I'm very used to that. And maybe it was a surprise a long time ago, but I've been doing this for a while now. So I am
You've been in this battle for 11 years, man.
11 years when the file got stolen. But I'm from Detroit. I was raised by my parents, who were both Detroit police officers when they met. That probably had a lot to do with, I think, looking back, in my sort of naive, sadly, expectation that justice actually prevails in this country. And and boy, was I in for it, because I had that expectation, and I kind of lived the American dream. I was the first. I mean, my parents went to college, but not like straight out, and I was the first one that kind of did that. I went to the University of Michigan. I got a degree in economics, and I didn't want to work in the auto industry, and I didn't want to be in the cold, and I didn't want to be a police officer. So it was a terrible economy, and I moved. And I wanted to be in medicine, and I ended up in surgical sales. And I became a healthcare entrepreneur, and I worked in the operating room for about 15 years, making extremely good money, working collaboratively in like a consultative sales position with surgeons. And that taught me a tremendous amount. And I left when it was time to start my own company, and really just did the same thing, but with prostate cancer. And I opened a medical laboratory called LabMD. And the focus of it was supposed to be on the physician and the patient, because the reality of ancillary services in this country is that the customer is the insurance carrier. And so we built something through technology that we could really, urologists don't have a broad menu. They have a lot of patients who are in Medicare age, and they have a lot of prostate cancer analysis. So we could, as a small company, really build a real niche that the big dogs couldn't compete with. So everything was going swimmingly, and I did not. I mean, I laugh now because I got offered to buy out the company, and and I no, I'm so happy. I want to do this forever. Tra la 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 la. Stupid me, because I didn't. Life would be so different now, but I didn't realize one day. And we're debt-free and profitable, about 40 employees, diagnosing cancer patients.
Right. I mean, you guys were on a good track. You guys
26,000 square feet in Atlanta. Beautiful laboratory. I mean, beautiful. So like most people don't know, in hospitals, laboratorians work in like cinder block places with no windows. We had floor-to-ceiling windows and fall hardwood floors. And I mean, we just paid attention to environment but it was a really good place. And so I guess it was too good. And one day the phone rang and a guy called us and saying, we have found 9,000 of your patients out in cyberspace in one file. And this guy's name was Robert Balbick, and he said he was the CEO of Tyversa. Now, it's really kind of weird for the CEO to call you to do a sales pitch. And immediately, since my company's differentiation against these big dogs was technological, we had tech people that worked for me full time.
Right.
And they're like, this is bogus. This is impossible. But in tech, knowing it versus proving it are two different things.
Right.
And what frustrates tech people and what frustrates medical people is dealing with powerful people that have no knowledge of tech or medicine. And that's what happens when you go to Washington, is you have all these people that they're so full of themselves and they don't know anything that they're doing, but they get away with it. And so we didn't believe him. We asked him to prove it. We asked, what IP address did you get it from? And he wouldn't answer the question unless we hired him. We knew he was lying, but we had to prove he was lying. So we asked for him to put everything in writing. This is a masterful guy, and we had I had no druthers that this guy, it didn't shock me that we had no victims show up. And what happened was we found that one workstation in the billing manager's office had LimeWire on it.
Now, for those who don't know LimeWire, because remember, we are talking about a generation that...
Right, I know.
P2P, peer-to-peer, right? That's how you got music before iTunes. That's how you got music before SoundCloud. That's how you got music before anything. I mean, it was just a way to download music.
You download a folder and you say, hey, world, anything in this folder you can get. Now, that was even back then, that was against our employee handbook. And I will tell you that there's never enough time to talk about all that went on, but one thing that always chafes me about this whole thing is it's amazing the number of people that write about my story that don't bother to fact check. And they say things like, especially the lawyers, they say things like, well, LabMD had downloaded LimeWire. We did not. That we don't know who downloaded it. She used it against authorization, but she joined the company in 2007. It was downloaded in 2005. But we didn't, we saved all that stuff. But who in their right mind would go, oh, here's a guy that's coming to extort you and your life will never be the same 11 years later? I mean, so, if you do that type of paranoid behavior, people think you're paranoid. So, he sent the file to us. We knew immediately it was in the billing department because it was a billing file off of a billing report that was off of that software that was nowhere else in the company. It was not in the medical database. It was in a completely different server on a different floor because we were growing so fast. We were in a 400,000 square foot building and we had 4 different offices throughout the building, and the employees in the billing department didn't even know the employees in the medical side. So this was completely isolated, but those details don't get out in the press. They hear.
They don't. I mean, when you read the book, they do.
Of course.
I mean, you do a great job.
But we don't read books.
Some of us do.
I don't read books. I mean, I write them. Right. I mean, really, no, to be like brutally frank, I wrote the book to put a stake in the ground, and I knew it was going to be a long haul. I knew it was going to be a long time. Because if anyone that wanted to publish the book wanted to change the book. Because especially back then, this is before, this is when Obama was president. And, I mean, I would love to give people a crystal ball back then. I was writing the book in 2012, and it's like, well, the devil inside the Beltway, you can't say it's Obama. And I so made sure that his name wasn't in there because it's not about Obama. Not about him at all.
I mean, this thing started in 08. In May of 08. Bush was still president.
Right. And so what I've learned now that I didn't know then is I often say, look, folks, here's what you don't know, because we're not taught this, so it's not your fault. But bureaucrat is about 5,000 times bigger than Republican plus Democrat combined in Washington.
Right.
And the reason they tilt Democrat is because that's who has a sort of a brand of keeping the government in place. But they don't. It's a whole nother talk. But anyway, so back to the story. So to briefly set it up, and I will get to the point quickly on this. But so we isolated LimeWire. It was nowhere else in the company. We examined everything. We got rid of it. We got rid of that. We got rid of the employee. She did not install it, but she was using it. There was 900 files in that folder. All 800 and some odd were music. 20 of them were redacted. There were 2 files that had patient data in it. One had one patient name, and another that had this 9,000 patients with their billing information, meaning not their home address and not their phone number, but their date of birth, their name, and their insurance carrier, and the tests that they had, and the diagnosis code. So we watched really carefully. We looked out in cyberspace. We couldn't find it. He started calling us and telling us, hey, you should do this sooner than later. Supreme Court Justice Breyer's stuff just got out. Did you read the Washington Post? Peer-to-peer spreads. Don't wait. All with a friendly tone. And I'm like, this guy is not friendly. You do not call up a medical facility and act like a seducer with patient information of a company that diagnoses cancer. You don't do that. We don't. So your competitors and your enemies in medicine are frenemies. It's because we all have to work together.
You have to work together, but you're looking for him around the corner to see if you can take him out.
Right. And so, but not anyway, not like this. So, all right. So we ignore him. And he won't go away. But then he gets upset and he says, well, we're going to call the Federal Trade Commission. And I have to tell you, I have had phenomenal experience with Health and Human Services. And we were I think we really loved the Georgia regulators, which is so weird to come out of my mouth, I guess. But I now know the reason why is because they were trained in medicine. These were regulators. They were technologists and medical technicians and pathologists, and they're professional. And it was not a gotcha game. I mean, these guys were awesome. And the Georgia group is fantastic. And so I thought everything was like that. And so I was like, call the government. They're just doing their job. We've done nothing wrong. Go ahead. And then, they go away. We don't hear anything for a year. We keep looking. Nothing comes up. Just as we relax, boom, here comes the Federal Trade Commission, who says, we're here. We've received, notice that you've lost information, and we're starting a non-public inquiry. And I still was like, okay, fine. And then we said, well, they sent 11 pages, single space the next day, and we dumped everything on them. And I thought they'd be happy we dumped everything on them. And they were mad because we dumped everything on them. That's when I knew what a Bates label was. Like, I'm supposed to know. And so I was immediately taken aback, having been raised with, investigators and judges and lawyers and at the federal level in my family. Because my dad was one of the heads of homicide in Detroit back in the 70s. I was taken aback by the lack of professional demeanor of these investigators when I met them. I mean, they were temperamental. They were patronizing. This was just Bush League. And and also they were full of themselves. Absolutely full of themselves. I thought they were saving the world. And so we got flown up there and we saw this, and I was like, holy cow, we're in trouble. And then, but still, when the government's at your door, it's a growling animal. So you don't make any moves and you cooperate and you hope they'll go away. And at this time, my lawyers were perplexed and thought, why are they doing this? You diagnosed cancer. There's no victims. It's not out there. You found the place. You took care of it. It's gone. It's done. There's no, and they just wouldn't go away. So after a couple years of this, and this is terrifying my management team, by the way, because people that work in medicine tend to be in medicine their entire lives, and they have a sort of a baked in the cake already ethical higher calling. So when they see this grizzly bear lawyer regulator come in, and it's supposed to be our country, it's demoralizing.
Right.
And it's shocking. And it's scary. And they know it. And they use that to get you to break.
But you were a small company.
That doesn't matter.
You were by no means you weren't serving the entire nation either, right?
But we did had 700,000 patients in the database.
Right, but based on your book, you guys were mostly focused on winning some of those, small, doctor offices
Right.
or medium-sized
Right.
doctor offices.
Right.
I mean,
That's
that was your business plan.
So and that's right. So I'm trying to figure out the game. What's the game? Why are these people doing this? Because lawyers, by the way, one of the things I've learned about lawyers is lawyers absolutely are not investigators. And lawyers will never tell you all the things they're not when you try to hire them. Why would they? So they're not, and what I've learned is they're not investigators. They're only as good as the cards you give them. And they're not going to say, you're giving me a lousy hand, I need more cards, and I'm not going to look. And I'm not going to turn the deck over. You got to go get it. But because I was a businessman and I knew how expensive lawyers were combined with their incompetence, I went and looked for them on my own. Because I had a father who had terrible things to say about attorneys.
Well, I mean, in your book, you talk about your kind of your experience with different lawyers you were speaking with, and $895 an hour, and $525 an hour, and $390.
And they're rude and unprofessional.
And then they would
patronizing.
Bring you 5 or 6 lawyers to a meeting and try to bill you for it. And
I'd call. I
learned how to hire a lawyer based on your book.
Right. And this is the thing about I was somewhat. This is a shock. I was pretty mouthy when I was in surgical sales with my company, in a good-natured way. We all got along. But I remember one guy looked at me and goes, "Remember, Daugherty, acorns become oak trees." And I never forgot that because. And the other thing I learned, I'm in consultative sales. And one of the things you're taught about in consultative sales is, especially with surgeons, is you don't think you're the doctor. And you are nice to everyone, including the custodian, because you don't know if that's the head of the hospital's son. And when you're in long-term consultative sales, everybody knows everyone, and you have to just be polite. You should be that way anyway, but there's a business self-interest in doing so. So I was shocked to see the lack of business relationship ability of lawyers and how they treat their customers. And because I am a client and I'm a customer, and the amount of divergence between what the rules of the bar are and what real behavior is pretty incredible. And that'll be much more focused on in my next book, because it's what I learned because of this experience. And that's really my goal in the book. The book is written like a novel because I don't want to be seen, and I think people see me as this if they don't read the book. I don't want to be seen as someone that's just having a temper tantrum on the side of the road screaming, "Poor me." I really am trying to write a novel-like book that's true about what these people really are like and how they really roll, so that you know that when it happens to you.
I felt in your head while I was reading this.
Right, and that's
mind you,
supposed
I've
to be.
met you, right? So I felt in your head, I felt in your shoes, and a lot of different stuff that you were doing, and a lot of the different situations you were in. You were constantly trying to be like, none of this makes sense.
Right.
You felt like you were in a padded room. At one point, I was picturing you in like this insane asylum with a padded room, screaming, "None of this makes sense," and people looking at you like, "What's he screaming?" And people don't understand.
They don't understand, and they still don't understand. Well, I mean, a lot more do, because you got to think a lot more do. But I've learned a lot.
In 2008, what was security and what was a data breach?
Well, I don't even know if that matters. It's true, but it's not about that, because really the book's not about security and data breach. That's the background fundamental part.
Well, that's the story.
That's the story, but the real foundation of the story is uneducated regulators. This really is a story about dangerous government people that have power but no knowledge in what they regulate, and how that can hurt us, because these guys destroyed a cancer detection center and they got away with it. And when you burn the house down, you can't put it back. And when you win, everyone says you won, and we won. We won our case 11 years later, after I had to get $13 million of pro bono defense, after we had to go through the appeals process. It's when I talk about the long slog up Justice Mountain, because what the government has created is a mountain so steep that no one will climb it.
Well, in one part of your book, you talk about early on what you were talking about earlier. We got the 11-page request from the FTC.
Yeah, that was the first hint.
You guys spent
Don't forget single-spaced.
Single-spaced. You guys you took essentially almost all of your back office team, right,
Yeah.
in the company, and everyone outside of the people in the labs were pretty much in a conference rooms combing.
No, management, not just management, not others. I didn't let anyone know. No, just the
So it's
senior.
just the
There's about
management.
4 of us, yeah, and the lawyer.
And the lawyer, which was billing you at 400 and some odd bucks an hour.
Right.
To
And
put
then
it all
insurance
together.
wasn't paying for that, right?
Right. And so how much did that cost?
Well, I don't
what-
really remember now, but here's the big point of that cost is, see, that was a really critical time because Obama had just won the presidency, and we knew, here comes this type of flip the plate medical. This guy's going to want to ram medicine through, and we're going to lose because when the government takes over medicine, quality loses, niches lose. It goes to price. It goes to massive ancillary providers, and then you lose specialties. And no one that doesn't have works in medicine knows that. So you see, and for some reason, I never will understand the U.S. population watching pundits on, I don't care if it's Fox, MSNBC, or CNN. No one with medical background pontificating on medicine is just so annoying.
Well, I mean, that's the theme of the 2020 Democratic presidential candidates that have so far been in it. Elizabeth Warren did something on Medicare for all. Bernie's running on that same platform.
Well, as long as there's enough people out there that are dumb enough to listen to people that have no experience. I mean, and here's how I sum that up. When you're sick, make sure you call your congressman. Make sure you do. That's who's going to go. Just go right to the Hill and get your medicine. It's stupid. But I don't know what it is, because some people, if you said there's a plane crash, let's talk to our congressman about that, and they wouldn't do it, or nuclear physics. But for some reason, medicine is the perfect thing because most of us are very healthy and we don't have real experience. So we're a blank slate, and these politicians can paint this anxiety on it.
Well,
and only later in life do we learn.
One of the arguments about Medicaid or government running medicine is once going to a doctor becomes a right or a privilege, people will abuse it. So my kid's got a cold, I'm taking him to the doctor. I'm not feeling well, I'm going to go to the doctor. I lived in Israel for 6 years. They have a universal healthcare system. Right? Mm-hmm. You don't feel well, you go to the doctor. It doesn't cost you any money to go to the doctor. Right? You go see a general physician. It has zero costs. But here's the problem.
That's always easy everywhere, by the way.
Right. But here's the problem with that. When I ran a company in Israel, anytime an employee didn't feel well, he'd just go to the doctor and bring a note. Mm-hmm. And it was so easy to get a note because when I was an employee, I could go to the doctor and get a note. I'd just go to his office and be like, yeah, I'm not feeling well. He'd be like, all right. Yeah, we'll give you 3 days of rest. Now, people don't look at that in a way of going, oh, well, that's a great advantage. Well, not if you're running a business.
Well, this is the thing, is the governments teach dependency because then that keeps them in office. And so that by default ends up in people not understanding business. And they'd also understand that medicine is not all the same. Okay, so that's all fine and dandy. I mean, when I was at the University of Michigan, we had student health, and anyone can do a lump and bump shop and pool that, and that's fine. We call it lumps and bumps, and and flu shots and colds. And that's not medicine. Okay, that's common stuff. But when you lose the lottery and you've got some freaky tumor or you got something they can't diagnose, and it's just you, and you don't have energy because you're sick, too late. If you're going to, and that's the problem. When you start this politically majority-driven type medical stuff, the educated consumer is only the person that's been sick and through it. And that crowd is always a minority, and that crowd is closer to the grave. It's the perfect platform for politicians to exploit the public because we don't become educated until we go through ourselves, because humans learn through their own experience. So that makes us completely gullible.
Wasn't there a study about that in the midterm elections of, the amount of people that voted based on, it's like the Green New Deal that AOC just put out, which was the most ridiculous thing on the planet.
But it works.
It doesn't.
No. But it works in fooling some people because we all have our little, the number, I know this so much more than I knew it back then. The number of people that just are disconnected and playing in their bathtub with their iPhone and not paying attention to this and have uneducated opinions, and therefore they're there for the taking, and that's who they're going for. And if there are not enough of them, they bring in other people they can scare and make dependent. And that's the game, and it's gone off the reservation because the center part of the Democratic Party and some of the Republican, but mostly the center part of the got corrupt and then got caught. And so you have these huge holes, and it's not done yet. And now they love going, oh, this is such a terrible time now. There's so much division. I'm like, division what? Because we're turning the lights on and the parasites are screaming? That's what's going on. But it doesn't, but so if you want to be a democracy where you have to be, self-rule, and you don't want messy, sorry. Life doesn't work that way.
So let me ask you this real quick, though. In your book, you talk about Ben Wright.
Yeah.
Ben Wright was the guy who kind of was the game changer for you. He was the guy that took you out of that padded white room. Right.
He was the first game changer.
But he was the guy that took you out of the white padded room that you were in, where everyone was telling you, Michael, calm down. The lawyers, you're number 2 in the company, you're general manager. And so many others were like, Michael, yeah, something doesn't make sense, but we got to play by the rules. Mm-hmm. And Ben Wright was the guy that came in and said, excuse me.
Well, that was after one key thing. Okay, so first of all, Ben was the only lawyer in the country that I could find that criticized the Federal Trade Commission, their cybersecurity regime, saying, this looks good, it'll never work. Now, that makes him an early adopter and a visionary because he's turned out to be absolutely right. But Ben was a lawyer from Georgetown who'd been practicing for 20 years in Dallas, focusing on technology before it was cool. And so he's a real wonky guy. And so he's the only guy I could find because I was driven to go, what is going on? So just before I hired him, I found out that Tyversa was actually working with Homeland Security and had gotten, and Homeland Security had given Dartmouth $24 million for a research grant on peer-to-peer leaks because a lot of government people were losing data. Yeah. So I'm seeing congressional testimony with Bobick sitting there like the good guy, the very guy that tries to call and extort me and won't tell me what's going on and is vilifying me because I won't play ball with him. That guy I see sitting in front of Congress testifying for House Oversight and Commerce like he's a goody two-shoes. And he's sitting there at the same table with the Federal Trade Commission and Wesley Clark, General Wesley Clark, who turns out to be on his advisory board. So that moment made my lawyers go, uh-oh. See, I have the curse of really good animal instincts about people. So the more my lawyers knew me, they were like, dang it, you might think he's nuts, but he's always been right. And so my lawyers finally listened, and but I knew that what I say doesn't matter. I had to find third-party verification. So because he's the only person I found that would disagree, I found him and hired him and flew him out. But I had that piece already that showed this type of two-faced stuff. And so we knew that this whole thing had been a study from Homeland Security had been study by Dartmouth, where Homeland Security had paid for it and used Tyversa's technology and thanks them profusely through their papers, is what was how they got the file, we assumed. And that is a government agency. That technically isn't a breach, because a breach at that time is a loss of control. Well, we knew where the file was. It made perfect sense why it never spread. It made perfect sense why we could never find it. We knew they came in and took it, but if you said that out loud, they came in and took it, you sounded like a crazy man.
Right, because you go, why you? Why not
the
someone
government
else?
Would say, and boy, this is really frustrating. Every expert out there, everyone has an expert opinion, especially some CISOs in IT, some IT people, that everyone has this expert opinion without looking for any information first. They're like, and here was the mantra: it got out. How it got out doesn't matter. You're guilty. And even my own lawyers thought that. I'm like, no. So I had to put up with Daugherty's crazy. Daugherty's stubborn. It's just another entrepreneur that's so, principled. It's a really nauseating label because they dismiss you with it. They don't have to look. So when I found that, they couldn't deny it. I'm like, okay, so here's the FTC sitting at the same table in a hearing 2 years before my file was ever taken. Or 1 year before it was taken. And here's all this working together. So you tell me they're not together. And we also know that you don't just get to the FTC and give them a file. I mean, I hate to break the American public, but 99% of that stuff doesn't get anywhere when you call them up or you email something in. So there had to be a prior relationship. So once again, I knew it, but I couldn't prove it. And then Ben came in and I needed him. See, the other little caveat I say is lawyers, and some of them might not even believe this or be aware of it, but lawyers don't believe people that aren't lawyers. So when you call them up as a client, you say blah, 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 you might as well just be going blah, 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 because they need to hear from the lawyer. So I hired Ben as a time saver to convince my existing attorneys that there was something going on here. Attorneys won't listen to non-attorneys, rarely, because they don't understand the way the legal brain's wired. And so you to get your attorney's attention, it's much faster to have your own another lawyer. That's why I did that. So he did a great job and he changed everything because he became quite an advocate. But still, that didn't make any difference in the short run because the FTC, I talked to other lawyers and like, doesn't matter. So the Federal Trade Commission mandate is, and this is where people lose their minds, folks, so fasten your seatbelts. But the Federal Trade Commission is regulating cybersecurity based on a mandate they say started in 1914 with Woodrow Wilson and their FTC Act, with Section 5 that says they're responsible for protecting consumers from deception and unfairness. And so they're opining that unfairness is, that bad cybersecurity, whatever that is
deception and unfairness.
Is unfairness. And if you say, which we never did because we never spoke to patients, we spoke to doctors. These were the doctors' patients. So we never had brochures, lucky for us, or they would have probably gone after us for deception too. But we never made comments like, we've got great cybersecurity. We never said a word about that. So they could get us on unfairness.
But was that a big deal in 08? 07,
it's
08?
when I read about this in the book. It's when it was starting. What happened was the FTC was given responsibility to fix this by Congress like 5 years before, and they were completely blowing it. It was getting worse and worse and worse. And then the Congress just went at them, and then they just freaked, and then they had this team that was there to save the world. And you have all these people that can barely probably reboot their computer with this mission. And I knew that in 10, 15 years, they'd look like fools, but the clock couldn't move fast enough. And right then, the fact of the matter was that was not going to do it. You have to fight them. And I was learning all the powers they had. And this becomes, here's what happens. Congress doesn't make any laws on cybersecurity. They don't make any policies. They don't want to do it because congressmen don't want to be responsible. If they're responsible, they could lose votes. So it's better just not to be responsible. Let the bad guy be someone outside their office, and they can just go and agree with you how bad they are. But they love them. They really love agencies. Most Republicans love agencies too because the congressmen just get to campaign all day long and raise money and socialize and look like they're doing something when it's such a logjam and most of the stuff's done out there. Well, the agencies love this too because then they've got job security and no one has to worry about the messy public. And so they make up their policy, and the only way to unmake it up is to go to court. Well, you can't just go to court with them. They can run you through their own courts first. So to take on an outrage takes years and millions. So there were 37 consent decrees, all of which stated in the very tiny fine print that these companies admitted no wrongdoing. And every single one just rolled because the media is not going to do any research. The public doesn't have an attention span to learn this. They don't understand their self-interest. And so everyone just rolls. If you lose the lottery and you end up in their crosshairs, almost always the smart thing to do is to settle to stop the damage of your reputational harm. My situation was completely unique because I couldn't sign a consent decree and survive. That is the point the government didn't get. There's no one in medicine that was going to refer to us, that was going to continue to refer to us when I signed a 2 decades long, because that's what they make you sign. They make you sign a consent decree, which means we'll stop investigating you. We won't find you guilty of anything. You just agree to do X, Y, and Z, and we get to audit you at your expense for 20 years. And then, as if that's not bad enough, they put a press release about you, which is on the internet and lasts forever. And the press release, believe me, is going to have a headline, how they've saved the world. They're going to have it assumptive that you're a bad guy, because that's what the public's going to think. And no one signs 20.
Because you signed a consent decree, right? You essentially said, "Oh, I had smooth enough lawyers to get them to get us to not."
Or I have enough
guilty.
money,
yeah,
or whatever. just go away fine, and then you can use. And so, and the reason the agencies want consent decrees is because then big law can go research them and go, LabMD allegedly did X, Y, and Z wrong. We will tell you, therefore, this is what you should not do. No one cares that LabMD didn't do it wrong. And I was not going to sit there and be a scapegoat. But the lawyers didn't care. The Chamber of Commerce didn't care. The courts didn't care. The FTC didn't care. No one cared. It was like the only reason I fought was because I was going to get destroyed either way. And it was really like a choice of death. Do you want death by rolling over?
The master, yeah.
Right. And then everyone, and then say, I mean, trust me, the least believed person ever in the media is a CEO that said I didn't do it.
Right.
So I felt exactly, in my mind, I was like, I just got found guilty at a trial. I'm not guilty. Everyone in the room thinks I'm guilty. I've got cuffs on. They're taking me back to prison. And if I say I didn't do it, they'll just laugh. So I stopped saying I didn't do it because it was a waste of time. And I just tried to dig my way through it and knew it was going to be a long, long, long haul. But it was going to be a long, long, long haul no matter what. Because the other long haul would be spending the rest of my life saying I didn't do it. And everyone would say, why'd you sign it, and move on.
Well, there's a part in the, in your book where you talk about the care that you had for your employees and your patients. Mm-hmm. And as a CEO of a company, which back then CISOs did not exist, you had a good handle on security. Mm-hmm. I mean, you did. I mean,
I had more handle than anybody because I built the whole thing. I created the technology. I pieced it together. I thought of the features and benefits, and then I went and found manufacturers and put it together. So, and that was the fun part about being an entrepreneur in healthcare. And this was the appalling part because, if I say it, it's always doubtful. The listener thinks it's always true. So it's hard. And you're so in medicine, you're never talking to the public, ever. And so you have no experience, and you're also not networking out in other businesses ever. You're in medicine, and that's it. And that's what you do full time. There's enough time. But you are responsible for the patients. And that is, and I used to have to, it was interesting because when I worked in surgery all the time, it was obvious. There's a patient on the table under anesthesia, cut open. So we're not going to listen to you talk about what happened to little Susie today, or if you're having a bad day or not. If that happens, you get to leave the room. It was so, I took it so for granted how easy it was to make people do their job or get rid of them. It was so simple. Even in a laboratory where patients came in just jars and tubes, I'd have to remind people because it was so quiet. No one came in the business except employees and the FedEx guy. So quiet. And so I have to remind people okay, we have 100 human beings here that just came in the last hour. And so there is, and that was my job. And I would say when I'd hire people, this is not a company where the employee is the most important thing. It's not. And if you can't deal with that, that is perfectly okay. It's okay. Most people don't fit in that environment. It's a lot of pressure, and you can't be number one, and there's not going to be a ping pong break table. Not. So, but people get a lot of satisfaction. When I sold medical devices, I remember there was this room up in Minneapolis that was no windows, huge air cleaning vents from ceiling to wall, and these women would sit there all day, covered up in white, head to toe, and they would do this painstaking teeny gluing, and that's all they do all day. And there was so little turnover in that job because they all felt such a mission in their work because they knew everything they touched was going into a human being's body to make their life better. And that type of thing is exactly what the regulators came in and just smashed. And they were fine with it. And that fueled my fury because I was like, I've got to protect this. This is unbelievable. This is terrifying. They're treating us like we're felons and we're diagnosing cancer, and they're getting away with it. It still is incredible to me.
You look at it. You look at what LabMD went through, what you guys went through. You went through how many lawyers?
Oh gosh, I can't even count. But I will tell you that. I guess in the beginning 3 or 4, and then when we got sued, I do not pay attention about 85% of the lawyers. There's 15% good, and it's hard to find them. And most of them are not in big law because big law wants big dogs and big dollars. And if you have to ask, you can't afford it type people. And there's exceptions to that rule, but by and large, it's just a big machine. And if you fit in it, great. But if you don't fit it, don't try to go get crushed. And so I really had to find certain people. And I knew very early that I started writing the book. Well, I was telling my lawyers, my lawyers were going, they're probably going to dismiss this. We just had WikiLeaks. We've just had Assange. We've just had all these breaches. We've got Snowden. The government's got their hands full. Why are they going to come beat up a cancer detection center? I was like, I'm thinking, these people are nuts. They're not going anywhere. I'm the only one that would say that. They're crazy.
Well, they weren't. I mean,
they're zealots.
Every time you gave them an answer, they dug deeper and came back and asked you more.
And that's the big secret. The great observation of that is that's how bureaucrats build cases against you. They ask for everything. Your lawyer doesn't have the spine to say don't give it because you'd get a contempt charge. And then they go through it and they build a case against you. And they're allowed to enter. They're allowed to enter because it's civil, not criminal. So I also learned that all these rights we all have burned into our brain that we have are for criminal behavior. This isn't criminal behavior. Therefore, they get to walk right over you. And the price you pay is financial destruction, not a fine, not a jail. So it doesn't fall into the legal, narrow definition of punishment. It is a 21st century version of the 16th century torture chamber where they show you what they're going to do with you if you don't buckle. And most people buckle. And again, that sounds really sharp, but it's absolutely true. And they do, and they go after the small because they wanted to scare
precedent.
They wanted companies to be scared into complying, and they want to start building a rule book of what you're not supposed to do.
You were precedent.
I was precedent. I was a guinea pig, and I was supposed to be an example. I was supposed to be the head on the spike on the bridge.
You were supposed to be the case that when it happens to them, go, oh, look what they did to LabMD.
And it still is true. There's still lawyers. Believe me, there are still, especially in big law. I hate to beat up big law, but big law, you got it coming. There's still tons of big law. Not my lawyers at Ropes and Greer Orrick, by the way, but many of them that are big law that's infiltrated with former government lawyers is a dangerous combination, and that's because they really send a signal that they're going to settle. That their marquee value is because they have relations with the agency, and the corporations just want to get rid of it.
Right. The first lawyer you hired out of D.C., I think it was.
No, she's the second one. D.C. The first one's Atlanta, who was
right.
Who was good.
Who was your lawyer?
In hindsight, she did a great job. She made one little mistake, but she did a great job.
The second lawyer that she said, hey, we got to deal with the FTC. You got to get someone
She worked
who can
there for 20 years.
FTC.
Right.
And that lawyer, who if you want to mention
well, I mean, she's in the book.
She's in the book, right?
Yeah, she's at Kelly Dry, but yeah.
Right. It was fascinating for me to see how she tried to essentially kind of just get you to roll over and die.
Well, and dumb for her to put it in writing.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's the thing.
I mean, the emails are in the
book. So folks, you don't, I mean, the book had to be written because I didn't have to put any opinion. All I do is show you. I don't have to tell you. I just show you because any lawyer that texts someone.
Everything you say is backed up by an email. I mean, that was the most fascinating part of it. You're reading an email that says, okay, Mike, in other words, what I'm saying is we can probably get a deal where you sign a consent and we move forward. Well, they haven't given you a consent, decree yet, so we can still maybe get them to drop this.
Then all the lawyers are cowards, basically. Like I feel so...
Well, they're afraid to burn themselves, right?
I feel so bad for C-suite. I really do. I feel so sorry for boards and executives because the lawyers are there cowering and they're...
I think lawyers should have term limits.
Yeah, well... I think lawyers should have some testosterone, but it's tough. It's a tough situation because they are well aware of how the deck is stacked against you.
Well, the legal system...
And who wants to tell you that?
Well, but let me put it to you like this. As a lawyer, you've got a 20, 30-year career that you've studied for to be a lawyer, right? If you go and you burn yourself in front of the judge, you may not want to burn yourself in front of the judge because every case you present in front of that judge... If the judge doesn't like you, even if you make the best case in the world, could still rule against you.
Because there's no accountability of judges. That's another thing which will be much more highlighted in my next book. I mean, I'm sitting burning bridges like crazy because I'm sitting here. I mean, I've got judges.
Well, because you've got nothing to lose.
Well, I do have something to lose as far as rebuilding myself. I mean, judges I've been in front of now have read my book and like, oh, Mr. Daugherty, I've read what he says about Judge Forrester. He doesn't like da-da-da. And they make these assumptions and I'm like, no. I don't like anyone that doesn't do their job. I don't like doctors that don't do their job. I don't like lawyers that don't do their job. And I really find people that take sacred duty oaths that don't do their job really, 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 really appalling. And lawyers can't do it. Lawyers are bound to be quiet by oath. They can't. It's not. I actually, going through this more, I more vilify judges than I do lawyers these days, because judges make lawyers crazy. You're supposed to build your life up, and you're supposed to be in one area, and then there's a batch of you, and there's these lawyers, and some of them are just. When you take human beings and you give them these long powers, and what do you think most human beings do? Not all of them are great. You're basically at the mercy of how their mother raised them.
Well, you're at the mercy of how they woke up that morning, what kind of cup of coffee.
And I got some really good ones. I got some really good judges, and I got some really bad ones. But the two best judges I got were the ALJ and the FTC, and that guy should be on a major panel. He's fantastic. He was the best lawyer in the room. He understood it. He was out for justice and truth, and his eye was on that, and he was very savvy to the games going on, and he cut right through it. And he asked better questions than my lawyers did. And I tell them that, and they know it. And the other one was Judge Choplat on the 11th Circuit, who is appointed by Gerald Ford, 89 years old, doesn't have senior status, read everything. The guy is amazing. And these are the dirty little secrets that the public doesn't know, that I want the public to know because I want the system to change, is that these judges rely very much on law clerks. There's like a funnel. There's like a filter. Okay, they feel overworked. They feel overburdened. Your case doesn't really get read. If you think your case is outrageous, take a number. Okay, so it's like you're in an emergency room full of hundreds of patients in a courtroom, and if you think they're paying attention to all of you, going to read every single thing, think again, because they got another one right down the line. So you really get, unless you have an incredible genius of a judge like Choplat, which is very rare, you get these you get skimming the surface type of rulings. And I have judges that haven't read the briefs, and I have judges that don't read their notes, and I have the judges that, just have such broad discretion. And the next dirty secret is there's very little accountability for that behavior. Very little. It's a real protection racket between the lawyers and the judges about what goes on. And the person that told me how bad it was is Antonin Scalia. I took a class.
Rest in peace.
Right. Well, I took a class from him in 2013, and we were talking about the courts after, and it was just me and him, and I will never forget it because I had my name badge on, and he knew my name, and I was blown away by that. But I had seen him like 3 times the past 4 or 5 weeks, and we talked about a case, and he was telling me about, he said to me things that I did not know, that lawyers know that the public doesn't know, which is the Supreme Court has not been responsible for the last 100 years, nor do they correct lower court error. That's a surprise to most people. They don't correct lower courts. Now, if you're a judge and no one's going to correct you, so there's a lot of recklessness and there's a lot of craziness. And the media will not report anything that goes wrong in the judge because they don't want to focus on anything until it's at the Supreme Court. So unless it's a high media thing, and very, very unusual, Supreme Court justice reporters don't report anything that's filed and rejected. They just report what's taken. And what's taken by the Supreme Court is about 1% to 2% of what's filed. And Scalia said to me, he goes, Mike, I can't tell you how many times. I remember him licking his index finger and pretending he's turning a page. And I can't tell how many times I look at these cases and go, my God, they screwed that one up. But that's not what we take cases for. He was, and the public seems to think that the Congress makes the wonderful laws and the courtrooms are wonderful places because that's where we enforce the laws. And it couldn't be further the truth. Courtrooms are terrible places where people are really harmed poorly every day. Harmed severely every day. And I remember going, eyes open. What an honor. What an experience. That's some of the stuff that makes me go through this adventure that sustains me, because I got to learn separation of powers from Scalia, and he taught me those incredible things that are lifetimes worth of wisdom. And Darrell Issa read the book, and he opened a congressional investigation, and we had hearings, and then a whistleblower came out after the book was written. And all the listeners can read this in Business, by the way. Business Week, you can Google FTC Wounded LabMD. FTC Wounded LabMD, and you'll see this story come up on the top. It'll say the high price of resistance. And But anyway, so this book is really focused on taking people through the fire tunnel of dealing with an agency and how all the pressure points and when I wouldn't break, how the next round was even more pressure, and then how arrogant they are. So when after the book, when the book came out, they sued me. Within 2 days, they were going to sue me, and they said they were suing me within 2 days of the book within 2 days of the book being marketed, but not before it came out, but just the website went up, and then they announced they're going to sue me. And then when they did sue me, Tyversa sued me for defamation within a week after.
Right, and that's still going on, right?
And it's been 5 years. No, I didn't countersue. We were in a different court for different suits. And it's because that's in a state court of Pennsylvania. But it's amazing stuff. I've always thought this thing's never going to work out well for me. But the story is what's got to work out well. That I'm doing this to tell story so people can understand, because so many people just get crushed and destroyed, and lawyers and judges know it, by the way.
Well, I think a lot of people know that some people get destroyed. I mean, it's obviously evident by some of the criminal justice reform you constantly hear about, right? I just don't think you hear about it when it comes to companies, because the population tends to dehumanize companies, right? We were talking about Google getting a $1.7 billion fine. That's a chump change for them, right, this morning. I mean, you can talk about, a $2 billion or $3 billion or a $10 billion fine. Doesn't make a difference, right? It's all it is money. But then at the end of the day, it's small companies like LabMD that don't really stand a chance. And so when you think of us being the land of opportunity, are we the land of opportunity until the moment you no longer fit or you become a target for a federal...
We're the land of opportunity as long as you keep your head down, mind your own business, and whistle past the graveyard.
Right.
Okay, it's whistle past the graveyard. I mean, it's just like, don't, and the thing is, I've learned this more through experience the past 5 years, and I can't believe the things that come out of my mouth. And I know how I might sound to people, because what I've learned, which I didn't really understand, we're not taught about our government. And people don't know the government because they really have very little experience with the government to learn that. They have their political opinions, and they're going to cling to those no matter what. And if you're going to go against those, they're going to try to isolate you and not want to hear it. And the reason they're going to do that is because they don't know what to do. People don't know how to fight back. They think resistance is futile. So why get upset? And so I've experienced way more pushback against my winning and have been vilified by exposing this way more than I thought. I mean, there are like people, the ACLU has completely ignored me. There's also...
Why?
I don't know. I don't know.
This seems like the perfect case. This seems like the landmark case for the ACLU.
I'm not a minority, I'm a business. They understand that a third of my employees are minorities. That no one looks at it. They're too busy. Everyone lives in the Twitter world.
No one's painted the picture of LabMD and its employees, right? People picture the fight as being...
Because no one stops. Well, of course, because that's all the only way the media writes it. And the media that would write it, I mean, oh my God.
They don't get the hits.
Oh my God. I mean, the Atlanta Journal sent someone to my house like 5 years ago, and the guy goes, "Oh yeah, well, at least you're not a Tea Party," or, this is, listen, they don't take it seriously. You don't get, when you're unknown and you're like this, they think it's cute, or they think you're David and Goliath, and they think, oh, that's so inspiring, but they don't. You're roadkill.
Well, no one understands the toll of the battle.
Well, no one stops anymore. We're Twitter attention span.
So how has this whole thing in the last 11 years changed your life? I mean, it dramatically changed your life, but how did it change LabMD? I mean, so bottom line is this. This case not only cost you millions and millions and millions of dollars, it cost you a lot more than that.
Right.
It cost employees. It was your company was a growing.
They all lost their jobs.
They all lost their jobs. So what was the real cost of
this? And all the patients. And all the patients had to shift, and all the doctors. The doctors were so outraged that when we went to the 11th Circuit, many of my doctors got together and filed a brief to the court. And I think there were two briefs to the court on my behalf that really stunned the court. And that was the one from the physicians, and the one from the CISOs, because the CISOs had no skin in the game here.
Right.
The fact that they would come together and say this type of regulatory overreach is a futile waste of time that's going to damage and solve nothing. And they had no skin in the game. So when people file amicus briefs that have no skin in the game and aren't going to have anything direct and aren't involved with LabMD at all, that got their attention, and that freaked out the FTC. But how's it changed me? Well, I mean, it's been, there's sometimes I'm actually much more despondent. But there's other times that I just don't, I never am sorry about it. Usually I'm pretty tough. But the things that I've learned about, the surprises are what's so disappointing. I mean, the number of people that don't want to know. The number of people that just whistle past the grave. It fits if I think about it. I mean, I always ask the question through the book, and I answered it in the book, is what makes someone able to harm other people like they know they're doing? And I cite the Milgram study. And that's that electro study where they found like 65 to 70% of people will harm another human being knowingly if told to do so by an authority figure. And that was a very outrageous study, and everyone blew their mind on it, and it's been tested over and over and over. No one can debunk it. It's been tried all over the world for the last 20 years. This is in the late 50s. And so so if you have to understand that people will hurt you to protect themselves. And a system of codependency like the bureaucracy is, where are they going to get another job like that? I mean, once you get in the club of working for the federal government, that's a great club. There's no accountability. The check comes forever.
Unless there's a shutdown.
and then they get their money later.
Back pay, yeah. I
mean, and that's the most painful thing that can happen to these people. But the big thing is no accountability, no accountability, no accountability, no accountability. Now, that's really dangerous in medicine and healthcare and cybersecurity. Really dangerous because we have the wrong people. Those are the things I've learned and when I want to tell people, I'm telling them to help them, and they act like I'm offending them.
Well, I think part of it has to do with the fact that listen. The incompetency of federal government has been put forward in many administrations in a lot of different cases. I think your case is a specific overreach because the FTC used a clause that had no business being used to investigate LabMD at all.
They all do that all the time.
Right, but
all the time.
Well, it was an overreach on the end of cyber. I mean, even in today, when we go to the Hill to advocate for different cybersecurity laws, right? No one knows what agency should be doing.
Well, they just had a hearing. Portman just had a hearing, and they're all muscling up. All the congressmen. I don't care what party it is, by the way. They just want to position themselves to show their constituents that they were trying to do something. And so now, after Equifax and Marriott, they all run around going, "Oh my gosh, what are you doing?" We can't get a law passed through here. Let's be real. This is why Woodrow Wilson's the worst president we've ever had. I mean, he built this system, and it's such a huge behemoth. We can't change it. And Congress, until the people really understand what a mess it is, and they're far, far from understanding it because they're not even taught civics anymore, this will continue because no one senator or politician has the power to do it. Trump understands it. He's not communicating it that well. He doesn't have anyone telling story. He says swamp and deep state and all that, and administrative state. And we do talk about that now, which we never spoke about 5 years ago at all. So people read my book now and they believe it. When my book first came out, they didn't believe it. That's why it sells now as well or not better than it did back then. It's still completely relevant to today. It's basically a story of what it's like to go through a government investigation and all the dirty tricks they pull.
And the overreach.
Well, that's the same thing. I mean, overreach
my whole thing is when I read the book and I finished it, I was under this impression. This should have never gotten started.
Right.
This should have never gotten farther than a letter of response saying, here's what we know. Here's what we can prove. How about you go back to the people who gave you this and ask them for more information? But they never really did that.
That's just theater. It's theater. That's not their agenda. Their agenda is to create consent decrees in a pretty binder that organizations like IAPP and Big Law will distribute out to their people to tell them what you're not supposed to do. That's what their agenda is. And they need companies to be victims so they can point to them and use them as bad guys. And that's their agenda. And because I was not playing, usually what happens is they approach them and the company goes, oh, and the lawyer goes, oh, it's the government, just roll over and it'll go away and no one will pay attention. And then they do. And that's what happened every single time before. I mean, we walked into court and the judge said to them, well, you've never really adjudicated this before, but you've been doing it a long time. Which means I don't know that you have the authority to even do this. And
it was a war of attrition.
That's the big point. The big point is, don't think it's not intentional by the agency. The agency is intending to overstep because they know what it will take to pull them back, and the odds are so slim. I mean, when they were fighting Wyndham, they gave Wyndham an offer that they couldn't refuse the bottom of the ninth so that they never had to face the judge's decision.
Well, it was a war of attrition for them. They have unlimited resources.
They won't say that, but yeah.
I mean, they do, though. They're the federal government.
Well, the agencies don't. And some do, some don't. But it doesn't matter. It's, even if they had limited or unlimited resources, it doesn't matter. It's about, because intimidation is free. Okay, intimidation's free, and the payback is huge. Because even though, here's the thing, I won and made big fools of them, right? No one discusses it in Washington. Because that's what happens. When you have an embarrassment, you don't point out to it. Does Big Law wants to work with them. They don't want to be on their bad side, so they don't talk about it. I mean, all the stories dried up like an ice cube in the desert.
Right. I mean, you won. It was a 48-hour news cycle, and then it was gone.
Gone. And then when they didn't file cert, no news. And then no. And I mean, I talked to one.
Are they going to go to the Supreme Court with
that?
That
passed. That was September last year. They didn't. So it's law. It's
done.
Fine. It's done. And so they will
So what now?
Well, they argue that, well, they don't know what they can get away with. They'll still try to get away with it. That's the thing. They will still. I got called by a group that met at a Washington meeting a month ago because the FTC went and spoke to them. And I won't say who it is because I got a call that night. And they said, boy, the FTC came in where your ears burning. They're acting like you lost. And we were furious with them. And they said businesses don't care. These are bureaucrats that have wind-up dolls on their back, and nothing can stop them. You can't stop an agency until you go to court. That costs years and millions. Almost no one will do it. So they could completely violate the court order of the 11th Circuit, which I'm sure they will. But no one's going to do anything about it unless you're willing to go make an enemy of them and spend millions in years. And so I went and got pro bono defense, and that's because I was a small businessman in healthcare. No one's got the compelling story I have that's going to really get that. So they're going to roll. So you got to get when they hit you, you have to go to court. No one wants to go to court, so they can just hit you.
So what now for you?
For me?
Yeah.
So
you won the 11th Circuit.
So I rise from the ashes. Like I'm very driven to educate people about this, and I've learned so much. So I have another book coming out next year. That's a continuation of this. Is probably 2 books, and then I want to be a TV series, and we're doing TV series development work. But I'm slowing that down because I want to be the showrunner. Then I have started the Cyber Education Foundation, which is about cyber culture, where I want everyone in the room to have different positions to talk about cyber culture. Then I founded another nonprofit called the Justice Society. We'll start really moving later in 19, early 20. And then I'm opening some medical drawing businesses in Virginia. I'll be living in D.C. a lot. So I have to get back in medicine for my sanity. I have seen the beast, and I just laugh at every Democrat that actually thinks that government's a good thing. I mean, I was at a meeting last week with the Federal Society Student Symposium, and there was a professor from NYU who got up there and said, I think that commissioners should be controlling regulation, not Article 3 judges. And so I came out of my seat, and then when question answer time came, I asked him a question, and I told him to look at this case because the FTC argues that they don't have to have notice or rulemaking or have comment periods, that they don't have to tell you what the standards are that they hold for you to violate them. So that means you don't get to know the law until you broke it. And they would never admit that because they're not so stupid to admit it till they had to admit it when they were standing in front of the 11th Circuit judges. And then they had to admit it, and they said, we we regulate these things on a case-by-case basis, and we can rule make while we adjudicate. That means they can make rules in the seventh inning that apply to the first inning that didn't exist in the first inning. And they're arguing that the Supreme Court and Chancery said that was okay. This guy was a table-pounding, I love the SEC, FTC Kool-Aid drinker. To his benefit, I sent him the article about me in Bloomberg and the ruling, and this guy's been emailing me for 3 days, and he said, this is horrible. So what's interesting to me is the media that would never put this out. I mean, Bloomberg did one article, and there's so much more. You don't know what you don't know when you read these things. I mean, I'll tell you, it's a really well-written article. She worked her tail off. She had 3,500 words. It's a lot of words, but there's so much more that doesn't get reported. So reporters don't report it.
Well, I got to tell you a few things. So one, for those listening or watching us on YouTube, so The Devil Inside the Beltway, they can get it on Amazon, right?
Right. Audiobook, ebook, hardcover, softcover.
Are you on the audiobook? Are you the one telling the story?
No, I didn't know. I hired it out. I couldn't.
You should have done it.
I can't listen to my own. Voice.
I think you should have done it.
Yeah, well, people like the audiobook. The guy did a good job.
I really like the book. I can't wait for your next book to come out. The story is unbelievable, the LabMD story. You did beat the FTC at a very, very steep price for you.
Yeah.
But now, like you said, you build yourself up from the ashes. You go on and you know, I think it's by saying you're going to be in Virginia a lot, I'm guessing you're going to be spending more time trying to fix the mess that they kind of started.
Yeah, I can't help myself. It's really
11 years is a long time, Michael.
Well, I mean,
11 years is a very long time. It's a lifetime.
Life. It's not like I sit there and don't have a life. You know, I mean,
right.
I've met
you got great dogs.
I have, and I've met a million unbelievable people. I mean, really amazing. So it's and believe me, it's okay. It's good. I don't play victim really well.
Well, the book also. By the way, when you read books with a story similar to yours about government overreach or justice, you know, so forth, they write it in a victim when it's coming from the kind of person who's in there. This book's kind of written from an outrage standpoint.
Yeah.
Like at what point do you guys just go, stop it?
Well, I mean, I actually want to call the book F You, but fully call F You, because I still think to this day it would be fantastic. Like, and coming up next, Mike Daugherty and his new book, F
Fuck you.
That would be fantastic. But my mother's still alive, and I just can't embarrass her. But
my son wrote a book. What's it called? Fuck you.
It's just, you know, but everyone to know it. It's just, but it's really terrifying. I mean, and I do take great pleasure in how much the FTC hates the book. Like when I was on trial there, every day they'd march in with the book in the side of the box looking at me so that I'd bring my book in. I mean, I'm allowed my petty torments, and I'd point it back at them, and I'd say things. And I just, you know, they're like the B team that couldn't get into the Justice Department. They're just crazy.
The book's absolutely fascinating. I mean, it's a really, really good read. I mean, the first night I read it, I went 300 and some odd pages.
I know everyone says, I mean, it sounds really arrogant when I say that, because everyone says that. I could, once I stop. So people that, but still, I mean, you start from scratch. I gave about 2,000 of those books away, knowing, you know what it's like to give a book. It's so obnoxious. People are like, oh, gee, thanks. Your book. Okay. But you have to do it. About 5% cracked through, and one of those 5% was Daryl Issa.
You were at RSA.
Yeah.
We kind of missed each other there. But
yeah, because we're all running around like maniacs.
What'd you get out of RSA?
Well, I never even, I really don't, I step in the exhibit hall, but it's like my 6th year now, so I know a lot of people. And I've gotten, that's another whole thing. The tech world, trying to educate and warn the tech world has been another uphill slope. I'm like, don't you guys care about this?
Well, that was predatory behavior. I mean, really what happened to you was a predatory behavior by a cybersecurity vendor.
Yeah.
That kind of got this whole thing rolling.
Yep.
I mean, had they not had that predatory kind of...
But this cyber vendor was he's in Pennsylvania, right? Pittsburgh, the heartbeat of tech. You know, and that's why they got so much support. That's why they got so much support from Pittsburgh, because Pittsburgh's like, oh, we've got a tech company, yippee yay! It's not Boston, you know, or DC or San Francisco or Seattle. You know, it's just, It's Pittsburgh. And so they're embarrassed because they got sucker punched by this. I mean, this guy was a chiropractor a year before he started this company. I mean, this is what's so unbelievable. You read in the book, you're like, this guy was a chiropractor and he's testifying in front of Congress.
Well,
this is terrifying.
It's the story you can tell. We still see it today in cybersecurity, right? You have all these so-called experts that come out of nowhere with some sort of, and all of a sudden end up because they knew someone or they hired the right PR guy or they connected to the right person. I mean, that's all small potatoes. But what really happened to you, I mean, and I was kind of trying to summarize it on my own, was a cybersecurity vendor who had a predatory behavior, which by the way still exists today. CISO still get a call from a vendor that says, by the way,
CNBC put a whole article about it yesterday.
Did they?
She go look at it. This is January 20th today, right? With the 20th.
Today, March 20th.
March 20th. See, time flies. I still think it's 2016. But no, they put an article out that said vendors are so desperate for executive suite attention they're resorting to lying and blackmail. There was a whole article about it. And I went and I put it up on Facebook and I said, call me an early adopter. Because it happened to me 11 years ago.
Well, it happened to you 11 years ago.
11 years.
And then it got escalated to the FTC. It didn't stop at the vendor.
And folks, there's so much more to this story about corruption behind the scenes that we just found out 6 months ago. I can't talk right now, but just keep your eyes peeled because it is.
Well, we'll have you back.
Oh, it's amazing.
We'll have you back for sure.
Yeah.
I want to say thanks for being here, number one.
It was great.
The Devil Inside the Beltway is the book. Get it on Amazon. Listen to it. I guarantee you it is a very, very good read. If you want to know what cybersecurity was like in 2008 and how government tried to overreach and to hold a small business accountable.
They're still trying, folks.
Yeah. Hang on.
This is the playbook of all the agencies.
Jackson County in Athens, right, just paid $400,000 in Bitcoins to ransomwares. Why isn't the FTC going to them? And
that was a smart move. Well, you want to know why? Because we've got a ruling in the 11th Circuit that's going to smack them down. They can't, and that's a good thing because here's the other big picture. They've been doing this, and has cybersecurity gotten better? Are we all more collaborative? That's the thing about Europe. I met the chief privacy officer for GDPR when I was in London speaking, and we had a really good talk about this, which is American regulators persecute. They regulate, right? But they don't educate and they don't collaborate. And I said, this cybersecurity is like early medicine days, and I said, these guys are going to look like fools in 50 years because they're so arrogant in the bureaucracy. They think that they could make cancer illegal and that would eradicate it. So having bad cybersecurity is illegal and that's going to take care of everything. How's that been working for us? Not. Horrible. No kidding. Who in tech wouldn't have known it's not going to work?
You did an event that I attended where, one of the things you guys were talking about was
my cyber education.
Your cyber education foundation, right? And I came for a little bit. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to stay the whole time, but one of our mutual friends was there, David Katz, and
David, he's great.
I love David.
Just changed firms.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. He's with Adams Reese now.
Yeah.
He did.
He's a good guy.
He left. Great guy. And David was, I heard one of the people there talk about, election security and the fact that we can't even get our federal government to cooperate with state government to secure the broader side of elections and some of the election devices. And I don't know how real that conversation was. I overheard it from one of the tables and people were talking while it was lunchtime. To me, that's the epitome of our democracy, right? If the federal government can't work with state governments to secure our elections, how in the world can we expect companies to even start to cooperate on security?
You don't want them. They're not the answer. It's like, God, I mean, that again.
But who would be? If it's not federal government,
you have to have the federal government involved, like Israel. Okay, you have to have the federal government go and support the technology people, and that does not mean having the head of Google and Facebook and Oracle to the White House for dinner. That's a photo op. That's not really a solution. You have to build a garden. And I actually wrote for Cyber Defense Magazine for a while. And I interviewed 2-3 years ago the Israeli team, and I say, Israel does an amazing job of building a garden to let these seedlings grow, and because who has more experience in defending themselves in Israel? And come on, I mean, that's what this is. This is just a different type of war. And so, and I say, I have these snarky comments I say when I'm on the radio, which another one that comes to mind is I said, this is a cyber war. And we have the big, C-130 landing and the back's opening up and we expect soldiers to come out. And who comes out? Lawyers with briefcase. How safe do you feel? And that's who we're putting there. I mean, and they have, we've got technology in the FTC. One person that's a PhD from Princeton. That is not a technologist that understands this stuff. That's an academic. So that doesn't work, So we got the wrong people. But I don't know what it's going to take.
Speaking of which, you brought up Israel. Great segue. I am taking a delegation to Israel at the end of June. So for those listening, watching, if you're interested to hear more about it, you can reach out to us at CyberHub Engage. We'll give you all the details about our delegation to Israel at the end of June. We're looking at how other people operationalize cybersecurity. So visiting the Israel Defense Forces, and some of the larger financial services companies in Israel and the financial firms, seeing how they actually operationalize cyber within their own organizations.
Sign-up link in the description.
And there will be a sign-up link in the description. So Micah's being very kind here behind the scenes. Hey, Micah. And so the sign-up link will be in our description. But if you are interested to hear more about that, you can obviously reach out to me on Twitter, James_Azar1, or you can get in touch with us at cyberhubengage.com. So, I mean, you gave me the perfect segue.
No, it's segue. It's true.
It's the perfect segue. We didn't even plan it, Michael.
I just want to, but it's all. I'm just the clarion call,
By the way, I got to tell you, you dedicated this book to me, and I want to show it because,
What'd I say
to James?
Okay. Because I do not wax poetic.
Well, you shouldn't wax poetic. Nothing in this book is poetic. FYI.
And that was a really bad. I had a bad pen that day. That was.
It's all right.
My editor taught me. She goes, my job is to make sure that you don't put a book out that makes you look like an ass. And then she taught me the right page to sign on and everything. She's phenomenal. She's like that teacher that you're terrified to get, and then when you don't have them anymore, you're sad. She's just demanding.
Well, the book's a great read. Your story's unbelievable. We're going to have you on again, I'm sure. Can't wait for your next book. Do you have a name for your next book?
No, they want to be like a series, so it's the devil. It might be the devil dances inside the boat. I don't know, or the devil inside the deep state, or I don't know yet. I want to keep the theme, but anyway. So at this point, I don't know. It's not hitting me. The devil inside the deep state is what some people love, but I think that plays too. I think you lose an audience with that title. I don't want to do that. I know I haven't hit it yet. But so that's why this was originally going to be called The Devil Dances Inside the Beltway. And then they wanted to pull the world dances, and I let them do it. And I'm kind of sorry. It turns out everything that I want to do, I should have left. Like the whole, they didn't want me putting that whole thing in there about being a prostate cancer procedure, and yet I was mad. I listened to them because the biggest thing that people need to know more of, and that they don't know, is they don't know my medical background, and they don't know the LabMD background, and people that read the book loved that part, and I should have had more of it.
The one thing is, you talk about the Christmas party you did at Maggiano's.
Oh yeah, those were fun.
And I think that was like right before things really hit the fan with the FTC.
Right.
And it was kind of like the as you're describing it, we're drinking and we're giving away 21-inch televisions. And you're listening to Frank Sinatra's Christmas album in the background. And it did feel like a scene from The Godfather, because remember when they shot Vito Corleone, it was right before Christmas.
I was just to drone on and on and on this podcast about that. That movie, it's like when I finally won, and people say you won. I always talk about the Godfather scene when they go up to Carlos and say, that little trick you pulled with my sister, you think you could pull a Corleone? I'm like, oh no, this isn't finished, folks. No. Because I have the pie chart of litigation going. I'm suing the Federal Trade Commission of Bivens. I'm suing the investigators. I'm suing Tyversa. I mean, there's so much going on.
The battle continues.
It continues because and
you got to hold them accountable. It's not just winning.
Here's the thing. I'm going to be writing stories. Should I live long enough? Is what I've learned is I have to write story about the realities of this judicial system. It's a terrifying slog that enables crime and even violates national security, and lawyers can't talk about it, and judges don't want to talk about it. They all know. It's terrible. I mean, it's terrible. The judicial system is completely unprepared to deal with technology.
When you're a judge, that's your career.
They feel they're
That's a career.
They're very that's fine. And
That's
it's
a
a career,
career.
but it's a good. With some of them, it's a good. There's no accountability in there.
Well, we should have term
And-
limits for everything.
I don't know about that. It's
I
okay
think
to
judges should have a term limit.
I don't. I know. I think there's a place for lifetime appointments. I just think there has to be
In the
accountability
Supreme Court.
for what you do. Yeah, I do. I think
In the Supreme Court, I agree with lifetime appointments. I
yeah.
think any court under that should be a term limit.
I don't think that's going to solve the problem. I think that the issue is if we have to rely on how your mother raised you to do your job correctly, you shouldn't have the job. And we are not creating judges at all the way they should be created. You go look at Europe. I've talked to people in Europe, and they're like, "Oh my God, how you create judges over there? No wonder things are so screwed up." I mean, there's not a lot of time put into creating judges. I mean, it's a survival racket. And you have judges not wanting to make decisions because they don't want to upset their constituency. They don't want to upset big law, and they want to get the recommendation next time a seat's open. And they want to, there's a whole lot of considerations other than you. I mean, you are the visitor. The lawyers and the politicians and the law firms and the judges are the permanent players.
Are the residents.
Yeah. And and I think people should know it. And people learn that through story.
Awesome.
All
All
right.
right. Well, we are all done.
Cool.
Thank you for being here. We could keep going on forever.
Well, to be continued. Like
To be
the book.
continued. Yes. When the book comes out, we will have. Will you do us? Will you give me this one promise that when the book's ready, I can get a copy of it as well, please?
Oh, hell yeah.
And then we can have you on, and we can kind of do a big promo. Hopefully, by then our audience has tripled or quadrupled, and we can make it a big splash.
Yeah, it's great.
Awesome. The Devil Inside the Beltway, Mike. Thanks for being here, man. I really do appreciate it. You're listening to the CyberHub Engage podcast. Thanks for listening. This was one of the funner podcasts we've done in a really long time. Less about security, more about government overreach, more about the fact that as a small business, if you work in a small business, the moment of truth is it's a letter away, it's a phone call away. And we will be talking more about the cybersecurity vendors' predatory kind of approach to businesses, which is I'm going to call you when I know something's going to hit the fan. And if you don't do it, well, maybe I'll send it to the FTC, or better yet, I may send it to your board, or I may leak it to the media and let your share price tumble.
The media is not going to report. Oh, well. That's another story.
That's a whole other story. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. CyberHub Engage. My name is James Azar. I'm your host. You can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook. Search CyberHub Engage. I'm missing a bunch of other social media platforms, but who cares? You know where to find us. CyberHub Engage. I'm out.